Our headline story, IMF predicts clear growth in new 2021 forecast. The vaccines are here and the world is on the path to healing. More money has been moving around the global economy as commercial activities pick up. The International Monetary Fund is predicting growth for many countries across the world, as well as the global economy. Will Sub-Saharan Africa be part of this? You'll find out on today's show. I'm Tolulokwe Adeleru Balogun. Welcome. This is Business Edge. The International Monetary Fund has said that the unprecedented public spending to fight the COVID-19 pandemic is a push for the global economy to grow to 6% this year, a rate unseen since the 1970s. Now, the IMF chief economist Gita Gopinath explained that the improvement is being largely driven by increased fiscal supports, including a new $1.9 trillion U.S. aid package, more vaccinations, and continued adaptation of economic activity to overcoming pandemic restrictions. Interestingly, developing economies will grow faster this year than in previous forecasts. In its World Economic Outlook, the fund raised its overall prediction for growth across emerging markets and developing economies to 6.7% in 2021 from 6.3% in its January report. However, the fund kept its 2022 forecast for emerging markets unchanged at 5%, but lifted its predictions for advanced economies growth this year and next to 5.1% and 3.6% respectively. The outlook said that the pandemic continues to exact a large toll on sub-Saharan Africa, especially Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, and South Africa. It added that growth rates were significantly lower than the trend anticipated before the pandemic, with tourism-reliant economies the most affected. Joining me to look at the projections for some of the continent's biggest economies is financial analyst and the CEO of Astrodynamic Solutions, Mukhtar Mohammed. Mukhtar, welcome to Business Edge once again. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure, Tulu.
All right, so let's get into this. Now, looking at African economies, let's start with Morocco. The IMF has predicted that Morocco's economy will grow by 4.5% in 2021 and 4.4% in 2022. However, the Minister of Economy estimated that the economy will grow by 5.2%, slightly higher than the IMF's earlier projection. He also emphasized that the export-related sectors, especially automotive, textile, and clothing, are still showing signs of economic slowdown due to COVID-19's impact on the European market. If such necessary sectors are still slowing down, what will account for Morocco's expected positive growth?
I think number one, I think it has to be with the way they've been able to handle the pandemic, especially in terms of the numbers. Morocco was one of the first African countries that shut their borders. Up to this moment, their borders still remain shut to some part of Africa. So I think that's what they are looking at, and so they are not battling so much of the COVID-19 pandemic, and they've not really opened up their economy. I'm sure the minister knows one or two things. Maybe he is believing that they will open the economy very soon with the vaccine rollout that's happening in every countries of the world. So I think that's what he might be looking at, and once he looks at that, the tourism sector will still be a boom because a lot of people have been locked indoor for a very long time. They want to leave, they want to have some holidays, especially during the summer periods. So I think that's what they are looking and thinking that, look, well, what IMF is seeing now, because we've been able to contain the spread of the COVID-19 in Morocco, there was not too much shutdown in economic activities in Morocco, but what we saw was that Morocco shutting down their external influence, external economy coming into their country. And gradually they will open it up, and they feel that by the time they open up, they will be able to go beyond what the IMF is projecting.
Okay, so Morocco's export-dependent sectors will have to wait till things do pick up in Europe and the rest. But what can be done in the meantime to shore up these industries?
I think they are doing their own in terms of trying to do direct intervention in those sectors, trying to see how government can put in funds in those sectors to help those small and medium scale, especially those big companies that were affected in that sector. So I think that's what the government have been doing, and they've been achieving relatively good results because of the stability in terms of the kind of data that they have. So they've been able to impact that sector. It does not finally get grounded like people thought it will. So I think that's what they have been doing differently in terms of trying to manage the situation by doing direct intervention through funding.
So let's move to East Africa now, particularly to the leading economy on that part of the continent, which is Kenya. Growth is expected to rise from 4.7% to 7.6% after a financing agreement was reached. The IMF in February revealed that it had reached a 3-year, $2.4 billion financing agreement with Kenya to support the country's COVID-19 response and reduce the level of debt relative to the GDP. So do we have any of the fine details, the minutiae of what makes up this deal in terms of what really Kenya is going to be getting from it?
Well, unfortunately, Kenya has, most economics in Kenya have been shouting the IMF should no more give them that loan because they feel that they don't want Kenya to take too much of loan that will affect the generation years or more. So IMF intervention in Kenya is highly needed because as it stands now, Kenya is a worst hit because majority of their foreign earnings come from tourism.
Tourism.
And tourism as it stands is a no-go area. It has been in the state of Kumasu since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we are talking about 1 year without Kenya any foreign returns in their area of tourism. So it's a big challenge, and I think it's the right thing for them to borrow. But now we need to look at their income, revenue to borrowing. Would they be able to pay? But with the opening of the economy and knowing that Kenya is a destination for most European nations and even America in terms of holiday seasons, I think they will be able to go through it as well. But they also have another challenge which has to do with security. They have to use this period to set up the security so that the kind of security challenge they have, especially from Al-Shabaab, is not going to implement their growth again in their economy. I think they really need to look at that space now, especially now that sector is not really working.
Okay, so it's interesting you mentioned tourism. We're going to get into that later on in this conversation. But staying with Kenya, Mukhtar Mohammed, who's the finance cabinet secretary, he explained that the economy grew by just 0.6% in 2020, and that was due to the triple threat of COVID-19, a locust invasion, and floods as well. It will be buoyed now by stable inflation, interest and forex rates, as well as growth in private sector lending and the credit guarantee scheme for small and medium enterprises. But this forecast, 7%, is it achievable? Is it ambitious? What do you think in terms of Kenya actually hitting this growth rates for themselves sometime this year?
I think you have brought in some factors. Remember, it's more or less saying that if these factors are maintained, then Kenya may enjoy that. It talks about private sector lending. It talks about credit guarantee scheme for small and medium enterprise. He also talked about the buoyed by stable inflation, interest and forex rate, as well as growth in the private sector lending. So he's looking at all those now. Those are only indices that he's still looking at. They have to do the work to make sure that these indices are maintained. So if these indices are maintained, there's positive outcome for indices. That's why it means that we see that growth. But if there's any threat to this to stable inflation, interest forex rate as well, then they might not be able to achieve what he's saying. So it's still a big fight for Kenya. And remember that, like we said, tourism still remain their high ending. So they really need to do a lot to be able to grow their economy by 7%.
Okay, so we will move to South Africa now. And of course, we know that Africa's most industrialized economy has been facing some tough times. Well, the World Economic Output is actually projecting a stronger recovery in 2021 for South Africa. The updated data for South Africa shows that annual growth is projected to be about 3.1% in 2021, an improvement of just 0.3 percentage points from the 2.8% January forecast. The IMF also forecasts annual growth of 2% in 2022 for the country, as data published by Statistics South Africa last month showed that the economy contracted by 7% last year. Where do you think growth is going to come from for the South African economy?
I think it's going to come from the opening up of the economy. Remember that South Africa is gradually opening up the economy. Especially with the hard hit in terms of the COVID pandemic in Africa. And remember that their gold reserve, the price of gold also have gone up. The demand for gold also has gone up as another means of investment for most investors, rather than investing in the normal conventional investment. So all that will help South Africa address the gold challenge. I think that's what they are looking. And remember that South Africa grew their revenue, grew their economy through the service sector. And it was a sector that has been locked down for almost over a year. But they've been partially opening of this sector for the past 6 months. So, and there will be a final opening of those sectors before the end of this year. So when you look at that, what they are projecting, you'll be right to say definitely it's achievable, especially the service sector once it's open up again.
Okay, let's use this opportunity to take a break. We still have a few questions for this essay conversation as well. And then, of course, we'll touch base with Nigeria, which is the continent's largest economy, and what it means for them. We'll have this conversation in just a moment. Do stay with us. So with me on Business Edge is financial analyst and CEO of Astro Dynamic Solutions, Mukhtar Mohammed, looking at the global economic outlook that was published by the International Monetary Fund recently. Now, touched base with South Africa, but let's also wrap up that conversation on South Africa. For the country, they faced a recession last year. They still have to grapple with Eskom's issues and how that is affecting the economy. They also didn't raise taxes, even though many said that South Africa needed to do that. Do you think the growth that's being predicted and projected, do you think that growth can be sustained if there are not some very intentional, deliberate, and deep down changes that are made with South Africa's economy?
Tolu, you said it all. There needs to be a change. South Africa is suffering from corruption and mismanagement of the economy, especially by the ruling party in terms of those that they have put in charge of this sector for them. You're looking at South African Airways that used to be the pride of Africa. It's out. It's no more flying to any African country, even within South Africa there. So it's a major challenge. Their energy sector also is going through crisis. So a lot of issues need to be addressed. It's not just throwing money into the economy that will address the challenges of South Africa. The fundamentals that build an economy must be addressed. When we talk about fundamentals, we talk about strong institutions, we talk about rule of law, and especially we talk about fighting corruption in the best possible way by the rule of law. So for me, that is a major challenge South Africa as a nation will face, especially the unemployment rate within the South Africa has gone up drastically even before the COVID-19 pandemic. Now with the COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen that climb up again. So it's going to be a big challenge for them to be able to achieve that. But like I said before we went on break, South Africa economy is driven by the service sectors. And once those sectors are opened up, they begin to rake in the revenue. And especially that that South Africa is not just a monotonous economy. They have gold, they have tourism, and also they have the service sector. And this service sector is being driven because of the kind of good infrastructure that they have, which make most multinationals that even want to operate in Africa tend to start from South Africa before they begin to move to other parts of Africa.
All right, so let's come to West Africa now, to Nigeria. The IMF has given a revised review of the economy for 2021, and the growth is expected to be 2.5% from the previous 1% predicted in January. What do you think will be the driving force behind Nigeria's growth this year?
Oil. Oil. There's nothing. If oil price goes up, economy goes up.
Wow.
Oil price goes down, we suffer. So there's no any time for what is making them. Remember that IMF was predicting that oil price will open up between $40 to $45 per barrel. We've seen that move to about $62 per barrel. So definitely that's what is going to drive the economy GDP to go up. Definitely nothing more than that.
And that's interesting because when you look at it, for all of these economies, January figures were different than the figures that are coming out now. And a lot of people are wondering what's accounting for the difference. So can you tell us overall, globally as it may be, and even if the picture is just for Sub-Saharan Africa, what's accounting for the difference? From Nigeria, it was 1% to now 2.5%. For Morocco, you had for Kenya, rather, you had some 4% to some 7%. Why the difference in just a few months in these projections?
The vaccine, they didn't think they would have the kind of success the vaccine is beginning to achieve. People are going out and taking this vaccine. Most economic economic activities are virtually opening up in every nation. No nation wants to be shut down. And so when you look at that, when they made this projection, they had this partial lockdown. They had a lot of consideration in terms of the aspect of the economy will open up. And then if you look at the East African, like you said, you look at tourism, and they are saying, okay, tourism will open up. A lot of people will come in there. They will earn more revenue. You come down to Nigeria, like we just said, the price of crude has gone up. So definitely it's going to have a positive impact in the economy. So for me, I think it's just all about that the world is not going to be closed any longer. It will be open for economic activities. It will be open for tourism, traveling. A lot of economic activities will begin to pick up. They start picking up. Most, like the United Kingdom, the UK will be totally opening up their economy by the 12th of April. Major shops in the UK will be open for business. So those are part of the things that you are seeing. The United States they've been a slowdown in terms of the number of deaths in terms of COVID-19. They are planning. The government has just introduced a stimulus package again to stimulate the economy. So a lot of things are going. Most nations are looking at how do we help our economy rather than closing it down. So with that, prediction of before, then you expect some of these things you are hearing.
All right, so just a few more questions before we wrap up, and we will definitely touch base on that tourism thing. But the fund said it's now predicting economic growth lower than this year's forecast in 2022 for Nigeria, and that will be 2.3% instead of the 2.5% expected this year. Will positive growth, it would make anybody happy. You know, everybody will be happy, even if it's 2%, even if it's 1%. As long as it's positive, we would all be happy. But Nigeria in particular needs either double-digit economic growth or at least growth upwards of 6 to 7%. The economy has failed to meet up to that even before COVID-19. What do you think it would take to take Nigeria's growth rates into higher numbers?
It will take a lot of work. And some of those work we have to diversify economy. We have to stop the subsidy we enjoy in electricity. We have to stop subsidy in petroleum products. We have to build institutions. We have to attract foreign direct investors. We have to attract portfolio investors. So the list goes on and on and on. Basically, for us to move from where we are to where we want to be, we need to build infrastructures, and not just build infrastructures. We need to build infrastructure that will help create jobs for the youth. We have about 33 million Nigerian youth that are unemployed. That's for unemployed. We see have those that are going to underemployment. And so it's a big challenge for us to be able to do that. We need to diversify the economy. And when we talk about diversification, we just don't think about, let's just go to agriculture. When you look at agriculture, you look at your competitive advantage. Is it in terms of climate, in terms of the crop growth, yield in your own locality, in your own environment? You need to look at what you can do that other countries are not doing that will earn you foreign forex, foreign exchange. And once you enter foreign exchange, you're able to give the reserve. Then we don't have the kind of intervention we have CBN doing in the market, and then our reserve is off. Then we don't have those external shocks that have to come because of the price of crude oil going down and up. So by the time we're able to do this, we are not depending solely on crude oil. Then we'll be able to achieve it. But if we don't do that, we will still continue to suffer. And remember, like I always say, it's not a problem that started with this administration.
Yes.
It's a problem that started with the previous administration. So it's a long-term problem. So it's going to require a long-term solution, not a short-time we are seeing every government is trying to do.
All right, so very quickly, the report also mentions tourism-reliant economies, that they are going to particularly feel the heat. And we know there are many of them on the continents that will continue to feel that heat of COVID, even after other economies have recovered. For African countries like Uganda, Algeria, Egypt, South Africa, Kenya, Morocco, Tunisia, Ghana, and Tanzania, they make the most from tourism. What do you think they can do in order to replace the tourist funds that are not yet coming in? Yes, vaccines are coming out, but we're seeing conversations around a vaccine passport. We're seeing conversations around some people will come and some people will not. So what can those countries that are really feeling the pinch from this missing tourist funds do in order to reduce the effects?
Number one, they need to bring those data, let the world begin to see that there's a reduction in the pandemic in their area, and the vaccination is doing on very well. There's no conspiracy theory. And if you look at Tanzania suffered because of the conspiracy theory. Ghana is suffering because there was being a shutdown of all economic activities that have to do with tourism. Same thing with South Africa. So once all these economies are opened, and then the vaccine is rolled out, then the numbers are coming down, definitely they will begin to see this result. I don't think they need to do too much of what they have done before, or what they should be doing, which is what we said in Africa. The major challenge of every African country is all about infrastructure. So this would have been a good time for them to build infrastructure. But unfortunately, they could tell you that the pandemic also affected their revenue. So it's neither here nor there. But what I think they should do is to make sure concentrate that enough of their citizens are able to be vaccinated, and the numbers of COVID-19 cases will drastically come down. Automatically, the tourists will start coming.
All right. Mukhtar Mohammed, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me on Business Edge.
My pleasure.
Okay, before we wrap things up, let's give you a few stories we're keeping our eyes on. And we start in Kenya, or rather we start with South Africa, where the rand hits its best performance in 6 weeks. From there, we move on. Oil holds steady as OPEC targets output increase. And then third on our list, not even second, third on our list, KenGen earns 440 million Kenyan shillings from geothermal tender in Ethiopia. And finally, we have the CBN to freeze over 100 bank accounts of BDCs and companies that are being investigated, and that's the Central Bank of Nigeria. And that's it on this edition of Business Edge. As always, thank you so much for joining me. Head to our website, head to our YouTube channel if you've missed any of this week's conversations on the big business, economic, and financial stories that are coming out of the continent. Until Monday, I'll see you again soon. I'm Tolulokwe Adelaru Balogun.